Hello, and welcome to Rob from the Internet Talks About Beer, a show where we discuss different styles of beer, their flavor profiles, and their history. I'm Rob from the Internet. Let's talk about beer. All right, so joining me today is one of my buddies from Twitter. He goes by the auspicious handle of Danny Homebrew. So it's going to give you a little bit of a clue as to what kind of person he is. If you could, Danny, tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got interested in craft beer.
Thanks a lot, Rob. Like he said, my name is, my Twitter handle is Danny Homebrew. Like it mentions, I do a little bit of home brewing. I'm very interested in the process of brewing and how beer comes to be beer. So that kind of got me, experimenting and kind of just, going through the process myself. And I enjoyed it so much that I'm still doing it today. Maybe 10, 12 years since I started. Apparently,
Nice.
Yeah.
All right, so today we're going to be talking about Imperial Stouts, and more specifically, barrel-aged Imperial Stouts. So, for those who aren't aware, an Imperial Stout is also known as a Russian Imperial Stout, or sometimes a Baltic Porter, depending on where in the world it's actually brewed. It's a strong beer that first came into being in the 18th century. The first recorded brewing of it is by Thrale's Anchor Brewing in London. They brewed a beer for Catherine II, also known as Catherine the Great of Russia. So Imperial Stouts are one of those beer styles, for me anyway, that just seem to have an incredible pedigree. They're big, they're bold, they're luscious and chocolatey. I mean, they tend to land in the top tier for almost anybody who's a beer aficionado, the types of beers that they seek out, the Imperial Stouts, and more specifically the barrel-aged Imperial Stouts. They typically pack a boozy punch featuring complex layers of malty flavors that unfold and linger long after you've actually drank it. I mean, when you think of a style that like this that's already so powerful, you wouldn't think that there's a whole lot of room for it to improve or go up the scale. But barrel aging happened. So I was doing a little research because I wasn't exactly sure who got the credit for deciding to put Imperial Stouts in barrels. And it turns out that by all accounts and measures, it's Goose Island from my home state of Illinois. In 1992, Jim Beam of all distilleries gave them some barrels, and they decided to play around, and that's how the first ones were created. It's kind of cool.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, well, like I said, I wasn't sure either, and I try and do a little bit of research before we talk, so I have a little bit of knowledge. But I was like, I wonder who actually started this, and they're the ones who are given credit, And then immediately after, you've got like Founders, and you've got all these other ones that jumped on the train because I mean, it's fantastic.
Yep.
Barrel aging doesn't always make a stout better, but it never makes it worse.
Right. Exactly.
When you think of Imperial Stouts, what comes to your mind in terms of flavor profile or whatever?
Like you mentioned, a lot of roast, a lot of chocolate, a little bit of bitter there on the back, velvety. A lot more body than you would get in a regular stout, like an export stout or even like a porter, things like that. But when I think Imperial, or if anyone mentions Imperial, it's pretty much my first question is it barrel aged? Because to me that's that extra layer that you can throw at an Imperial stout that just makes it so much more complex and so much more interesting.
I agree. Yeah, one of the things I really like about barrel aged stouts, in particular, actually any barrel aged beer, is the flavor notes that get imparted in the beer from the barrels. So you take something like a stout that normally has that rich chocolatey roasty flavor to it, and then you throw in extra layers. You've got the earthy and oakiness from the barrel, and then depending on what was aged in that barrel beforehand, you pull those notes out. So if it's a bourbon, you're going to pull out that toasted caramel, and you're going to pull out vanilla and things like that. Or if it's aged in wine barrels, you're going to pull out the fruits. You're going to pull out the fruity esters that were imparted into the barrel. And sometimes even if the barrels aren't handled completely properly, you'll pull a little bit of sourness out of the barrels if they've had wine in them, because wine barrels typically harbor a lot more bacteria than whiskey barrels, because whiskey by its nature kills them off.
I always said the best way to do the barrel aging is having like you say, the used barrels, the whiskey barrels and the wine barrels. But there are some styles that they just use like new barrels. So you'll
Right.
just kind of impart that the oak or the maple, or depending on what the wood that the barrel's made of. Personally, I'm my preference is obviously the used barrels, because I find it gives you a lot more depth and flavor, as opposed to just giving it that wood character. It'll give you all the flavors from whatever was in the barrel before.
Right. Yeah, and it seems funny that it took until 1992 for people to actually start doing this, because in the States, bourbon barrels are surplused all the time, because by law they can only use a barrel one time to make bourbon. So, I mean, other than that, then you can just use it to make whiskey, but you can't make bourbon from it. So there's always a surplus of these barrels, and it just seems funny that it's like, oh, we've been making bourbon since the 1600s. It took us until the 1900s to.
What do we do with these things?
what do we do with these barrels? Someone go, hey, we could put beer in this.
Yeah.
Now, I'm sure in history someone else put beer into used whiskey barrels or whatever, but there was no formalized credit for it.
Right.
It wasn't a commercial venture. It was probably more like someone like you or I who's like, hey, I got this barrel, let's fill it with beer.
Yeah, or we need something to store this beer in. Oh, we got to use barrel here.
Right. All right. Well, I am going to crack open mine. I am having Nickelbrook Whiny Bastard 2019. So this is their Russian Imperial Stout aged in Pinot Noir barrels.
Oh, it's funny that you picked the Nickelbrook, because I have one of its brothers, if you can see here. I got one of my favorite barrel aged stouts, the Cafe del Bastardo, which is aged for a year in bourbon barrels, obviously with whole coffee beans. So it gives a nice coffee, very nice rich chocolate, and a good booze to it. So definitely one of my favorites. It knocked me off my chair the first time that I had it.
That beer knocked me out of my chair the first time I had it too, because it was the overwhelming coffee, which I'm not a huge fan of, which is funny because my favorite beer style is stouts and porters overall, but I don't like it when they cross that threshold of having coffee notes to being a coffee stout. So I took it the first time I had a drink of it. I was at the bottle shop in Burlington, and the bottle shop manager Rob there goes, "Here, try this. This is our the Cafe del Bastardos," and this was right after I moved to Canada. And I'm like, "All right," I tried it, and I'm like, "Oh, coffee! Too much coffee."
I love it. I always say that the coffee, like the note, like the smell of coffee and the notes of coffee is the best part of the coffee. Like the coffee itself, yeah, it's kind of meh. Like I like cream and sugar in my coffee, just black to me. It just tastes like water. And I know a couple of my Twitter friends probably chastise me for saying that, but like if you put the coffee flavor in something, then the aroma and then the flavor, it's like tripled, and then you get that nice coffee flavor, and that I I like the coffee flavor outside of coffee. Put it that way.
Yeah. So funny thing is I love the smell of coffee being made. I cannot stand the taste of coffee. And once you hit a certain level in a beer where there's coffee in the, like this, where it's actually aged on coffee beans, that imparts far too much of the coffee flavor for me. I love that smell. You pull up, like, especially like the Cafe del Bastardo, you pull up that nice, you get that chocolatey and that boozy wafting up to your nose, and then you get hit by the aroma of the coffee, and you're like, oh yeah, someone's like making like really, really rich coffee.
Right.
So this one, on the nose, you actually get more of the wine esters on this one. So when I smell this, it smells like a nice red wine to me, as opposed to smelling the chocolatey or the maltiness that you normally smell from an Imperial Stout.
Yeah, wine is definitely a lot more upfront as far as aroma goes. It kind of it's so sharp that it'll cut through all the other flavors, and it kind of makes itself the centerpiece of the beer for sure.
Now, on my first sip of this, because typically the way I do it on the show is I'll take a sip and we'll talk a little bit, and while we're talking, I figure out what the flavors were, and then I'll go back and I'll take a bigger drink because it's beer.
Yeah.
So this I get on the first blush of it, you get that stout, that good stout malt, but you do get the wine flavor intermingled quite nicely with it. So it's got that kind of fruity, like at the holidays when they have like the chocolate oranges and the things like that.
Right.
So it's kind of like that. The flavor has so commingled that it's hard to pull them apart. So in this one, you get that kind of dark fruits and chocolate malt thing on the first hit of it. So
Right.
on yours, is it just mainly coffee that you pull when you take a sip, or?
You get a lot of you almost get like the typical Imperial stuff. Like you get the chocolate and that kind of that dark chocolate bitterness. But the coffee is very much there. It's almost like you're drinking a mocha without it being sweet.
Gotcha.
Which I think is just fantastic.
Yeah. Now, one thing I want to let people know is, if they're not familiar, Imperial Stouts tend to have a higher bitterness rating than their non-Imperial cousins.
Yep.
So whereas like your typical stout will have a 30 or a 25 IBU or whatever. I believe this one, the Whiny Bastard has 70 IBU,
Yeah.
And the reason that they have the higher bitterness rating for the Imperials is to
Yeah.
yeah, that label's kind of hard to read because it's reflective.
Yeah, this one's 70 as well. So I guess that's their typical their Imperial.
Yeah.
It's the same.
Yeah, it's so the higher bitterness helps to balance out the malty sweetness that you get in an Imperial Stout, and it also helps mask some of the sting of the alcohol from the higher alcohol content, because your tongue gets preoccupied with the bitterness, so it doesn't get that astringent sting that you would normally get.
Right.
So on my second and now third sip of this, you pull out a lot more of just the chocolate, and then you start getting, on the aftertaste on it, you start getting that earthiness and that oakiness. So you get that slightly tannic, kind of almost leathery flavor profile in the back of my mouth on the end of this. So at the beginning, you're still getting that chocolate and fruit flavor, and then as it goes down your throat, I'm getting more like the oakiness, and there's some vanilla in there too that you pick up on after you open your mouth and you breathe. You'll get like a slight hit of vanilla on the back end. It's really nice. This is actually one of my favorite beers that Nickelbrook makes. We tend to buy a case of it every year when it comes out. That way I have enough to last me until the next year when it comes out again.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's a nice. It's kind of cool having these two beers. Well, not really side by side, but it really goes to show you how much the barrel makes a difference. The exact same beer, different barrel that it's aged in. I think the winey, you get a lot more of the barrel itself, because I guess the flavor, the wine flavor kind of dissipates a little quicker, and then you kind of go down to the oak barrel layer. As opposed to like the Bastardo, it's the coffee and all that seems to stick around a lot more, and the booziness of the bourbon kind of is what takes over, and it kind of sticks around a little bit more. So the oak is a little less there until like the very very end. You'll get a little bit of that kind of woody, light smoky kind of flavor right at the end.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think go ahead.
I said one of the things that I really like about bourbon barrel aged stouts is the overall smooth and mellow finish that it gives any beer. I mean, I've had Imperial Stouts that are aged in bourbon barrels, aged for like 2-3 years, and they're coming in at like 13-15%, but it's been aged so long and it's had so much time to sit and mature that it's like a fine whiskey itself. You don't get that harsh alcohol to it at all. It's just like this nice smooth mellow finish on it. You're like, wow, now this is the way a beer should be.
Almost dangerous.
Yeah. Yeah. Almost. Sometimes.
Got to double check the barrel. The bottle is like, oh yeah, 12-13%. Okay, I got to watch myself.
Yeah, I was doing that last year. I don't remember what one it was. I had a barley wine that was a barrel aged barley wine that came in at 15.5%, and I didn't realize it was that strong. I didn't pay attention to it when I bought it, and I drank 3 of them in one day.
Wow! Yeah, that'll take you up.
No, mistakes had been made by the time I cracked the third one. I'm like, oh yeah, and then by the end of the night, I'm like, why do I feel so terrible?
Yeah. What am I drinking?
So, one of the things about beer, at least for me, that is so damn cool and so incredible, is how much flavor and complexity can be created from 4 simple ingredients. I mean, who would think that malt, hops, water, and yeast could turn into so many different things? I mean, obviously, you can turn it into a whole bunch of different flavors. Otherwise, I wouldn't be doing a show about all the different styles of beer. But it amazes me that by tweaking little things, we're going to change this malt for this malt, and we're going to change the water from this type of water to this type of water, or we've got this different strain of yeast, and it's amazing to me the process that happens, that just changing one small thing out of 4 ingredients can make such a vast difference in the flavor profile.
Yeah, it's a science of its own.
It really is.
Even like the malting process and all that, like you can malt your barley so many different ways to get like so many different characters. Like you look at things like just standard two-row to like more the British style base malts. Like they're all the same. They're all the same malt, and they're just treated a little bit differently, and they'll impart different different flavors, and then you got like let's roast this malt instead of, or let's roast this barley instead of malting it, and then you get like your roasted malt, and then you get like that coffee character and all that, and then the whole science between the hops, like people's, their jobs is to crossbreed hops and just make new varieties, and you're at the point where you got hops that are like imparting like candy flavors to beers,
Right.
this is a plant, it's on a vine, and then it's giving you candy flavors. Like what the like what's going on here?
How the hell does this leaf taste like butterscotch?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it is. It's pretty amazing. I mean, and one of the cool things about being a home brewer, at least for me, is that the ability to really experiment. I mean, craft brewers do a lot of experimentation, but they have to try and keep their experimentation to a level that's still going to make a beer that's going to be commercially viable for them. Right. Whereas people like you and I, we can play around as much as our heart wants and come up with some really funky things. I mean, and there's some like, new hop varieties, like you said, coming out. There's all these different strains of yeast, and I myself have been playing more with the Kvik strains of yeast. And I've been astounded by how well they perform. Like my Imperial Stout that I have on tap, I used Escarpment Labs has a blend of yeast that was called the Kvik Ring, and they had released different varieties. And I got one that was called Jordal or however they pronounce it. And I was able to take a beer that would normally be fermenting for a month to get everything out of it and have it done in 3 days. I mean, it's crazy.
Yeah, that Kvik yeast is a monster. Like that when they came out with that was like that changed the whole game, because the big thing with brewing, especially when it comes to the fermentation part, is your temperatures have to be bang on for your yeast to do its job correctly. And then they come out with this freaking this monster yeast that it doesn't care what environment it's in. It's gonna do its job. It's like dead set on doing its job, and it'll do it fast.
Yeah. So, and the cool thing is, with at least with this strain that I used, if you ferment it at the lower part of its temperature range, which was 20 to 27 degrees Celsius, you get a clean ale style ferment. But if you let it go above that, so the 28 to 45 degrees Celsius, which is insane, you actually get it starts getting like tropical fruit flavors and things like that. And with this one, I when I was researching which one I wanted to try, this one said it had up to an 86% attenuation rate at 45 degrees Celsius. I'm like, that's crazy. I mean, that's converting a whole hell of a lot of the sugars to alcohol, and it does it on the package it literally says 36 to 72 hour ferment time. And it was funny with mine, it was exactly 3 days. It's like it's just bubbling along, doing its thing, and all of a sudden stops. It's just done.
and it takes a kicking too. Like you can have like a 10% beer, and like it's still working, while a lot of regular strains of yeast, for a higher ABV beer, it's its threshold is like maybe 8%. Like once it gets to that, then the yeast starts killing itself off. But like the Kvik yeast, like you can have like easily get like a 10% beer out of one package. And
yeah, well, and that's what I did.
Yeah, it's like an unkillable yeast. It'll
right,
keeps going.
Yeah. All right. So, if you had to choose, say, I don't know, 3 breweries that make a barrel-aged Imperial Stout really well, who would they be?
Well, Nickelbrook for sure.
Nickelbrook's fantastic. Yes,
got a really really good barrel program. I don't know if I forget if Sawdust LVD is barrel aged at all, But that's a nice Imperial Stout.
I don't know if that one is or not, but the Revenge of Cthulhu certainly was.
Yes, the Revenge of Cthulhu. That one was fantastic as well. I think what was the other one off the top of my head? I can't even think now.
Oh, that's fine.
Spearhead. They released a couple of barrel aged versions of their Kahuna, and
Yes.
And their Belgian stout. Those were really good too.
I grabbed both of those this past year as well, and the barrel aged Big Kahuna was so smooth. Holy cow! I mean, as I tell everyone, I'm not that big of an IPA guy, but that barrel aged Big Kahuna was absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, let's take our most dangerous beer and make it even more dangerous. Is basically
right. Here, have this 750 ml bottle of Danger Juice.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so for me, one of them is Goose Island. The Bourbon County brand stouts that they put out have been my favorite for years. When I lived in Illinois, it was the Black Friday tradition that you went to the liquor store at 5 a.m. and lined up to try and get at least one bottle of each variety that they came out with. And then another brewery that I got to experience because of a friend of mine who lives in Minnesota was Surly Brewing. They're in the Twin Cities, and they make an Imperial Stout called Darkness that they do a barrel-aged variety of it, and it's absolutely amazing. It's super smooth, it's super roasty. And then you've got obviously I'd be remiss if I didn't mention Founders, because they're one of the originals with their KBS, which is okay, the Kentucky bourbon barrel-aged ones. But I actually prefer, if I'm going to drink that, I'm going to drink their CBS. I don't know if you've ever had the CBS, which is the Canadian Breakfast Stout.
Yeah, I heard about it. I heard it's one of those. It's kind of like the Bourbon County where it's like when it releases, you gotta kind of
So that one, they actually get bourbon barrels that have been used to age maple syrup in first, and then they age their beer in it. So you get the bourbon and you get the maple, and there is coffee flavor to it, but there's so much other stuff going on that you have to at least try it. And I know there's been a lot of controversy with Founders in the last couple of years with their practices and things like that, but This beer in particular, if you can find it, no matter what your feeling is on the brewery and their practices, if you're an Imperial Stout fan, you owe it to yourself to at least to take a sip of it someplace.
Right.
Maybe not necessarily buy a whole bottle if you don't want to support them, but if someone else has it, don't refuse it if they offer you a taste.
Right.
Because it's great. Another great one is out of California. There's a brewery called The Brewery, and they make one called Black Tuesday, which is a super rich barrel-aged Imperial Stout, which is absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, I know the Goose Island one, the Bourbon County. That's definitely on my bucket list of beers to try for sure that aren't readily available here in Ontario.
Yeah, I was sad this year I wasn't able to get any because of COVID. I couldn't go across the border, so I've only got 3 bottles left, I think, from 2019. So I don't have any of the 2020. Hopefully, I'll be able to get across the border at 2021 here to get some this year.
Yeah,
but I tell you what, though, once the pandemic stuff's all over and all of us Twitter beer people get together, I'll make sure to bring one with. That way you can try it.
For sure. Yeah, that'd be awesome.
All right. Well, we have come to the end of another show. So I'd like to thank Danny for being on. I'd like to thank anybody who's watching for sticking around this long with our rambling shenanigans here. If you like the program, please subscribe. If you want to be notified when new episodes come out, click the little bell. Please feel free to leave questions, comments, suggestions for beer styles you'd like me to talk about in the comment section. I look forward to it. I'm hoping to keep this series going for a long time. There's a lot of different beer styles out there, but I don't know which ones to cover if people don't tell me what to cover. Otherwise, I'm just going to cover the ones that I like. All right. So having said that, cheers, Danny.
Cheers, Rob.